Hello, good afternoon. We're so happy to be here. We are talking to you now about giving a voice to the industry. This is a very important topic because the industry, as you guys heard me talk about, some of you who were here yesterday, that the industry is changing the world. And in order for us to do that effectively, we've got to harness this voice and make it more effective. So ICBC put together a very impressive panel of experts on this topic, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they know who they are and what they do better than I do. So let's start down there with Georg. Georg, everyone here, as you do this, tell them who you are, tell them a little bit about, being brief, your history in the cannabis industry and what you're currently doing.
Yes, hi, I'm Georg Furt, and I'm in the lobby field for cannabis since 2002 as the head of German Cannabis Association, working for legalization all the time. And we made a big step end of 2019. Until then, we represented both industry and private people at the same time. And then we split that off and built a new association, which is the one of mine on the panel here, and I'm only the lobbyist for private people since that time, so I'm a little bit displaced here as a voice for the cannabis industry. I've been there a long time. I'm not anymore a voice for the cannabis industry, just indirect maybe, because the industry, of course, profits from my work when I'm successful and get the legalization of cannabis in Germany done.
I would argue that being a voice for the people is a voice for the industry. We need the people to be involved. So I'm happy you're here, Georg, and I think what you're going to give us is a lot of valuable insight. Now, sitting next to Georg is our colleague Finn. Go ahead, Finn, take it away.
Hi, my name is Finn. I'm the founder and managing director of the Sanity Group. So we are a German-based cannabis company. Today we're focusing on two different aspects. We're focusing on medicinal cannabis, like everything prescription-related with our brand Viamed, but also looking into finished pharmaceuticals and medical devices. On the other hand, we have our consumer health unit, which is Sanity Care, with big CBD brands like Vi and This Place. And for us, it's super important to bring the whole topic in Germany forward. We co-founded two associations. One is the Association Pro CBD, and the other one is the BPC, the German Medical Cannabis Companies Association. So being a voice for the cannabis industry in Germany or in whole Europe is a very, very big topic for me, and that's something I work for very hard. So I'm very happy to be here today.
That's amazing. Thank you. And then our next panelist is Marijn. And Marijn, it's your turn.
Yeah, my name is Marijn Roers van Hoogte. I'm originally Dutch, but I'm living a long time in Germany already. My background is I'm a biologist. I have a huge passion for hemp as an industrial raw material. I started in building materials, textiles, food, and since 2019, I'm one of the founding members of the Branchenverband Cannabiswirtschaft, the German trade association for hemp. It's very important for us to be a voice, to get all the people involved in the industry together and to form one voice against media, against politicians, to make sure that we achieve all the market requirements, all the regulatory, I decided a place at the table to make sure that everybody gets what he wants.
And to my left is my friend Bo Whitney. He's kind of a big deal in the United States. So go ahead, Bo.
So there's not a whole lot of economists that have industry experience, and so there's a fair amount of demand for my services. So in this capacity, Michael CORREIA, the governmental affairs person for NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association, was not able to make it here, and so he asked me to stand in. I serve as the chief economist for NCIA, so I'm here not as Mantis in this regard, but NCIA. NCIA is the largest and oldest and most diverse trade association in the United States, and they're doing some great work both at the federal level and at the state level.
I am the CEO of Bang Inc., which is a publicly traded cannabis edibles company. And we've been a member of NCIA for 10 years. All of our membership dues in that organization go to lobbying the federal government for changes, and what I'll give NCIA credit for is lobbying really hard for the Safe Banking Act and for the MORE Act, for those of you who are familiar with it. So the NCIA is making big strides in their lobbying effort towards legalization. All of this, this isn't really a panel on lobbying so much as it is giving a voice to the industry. And that can look a lot of different ways. Lobbying is one of those ways. But what I would like to do is ask Georg, who just recently made a big change when you split into two separate entities, one giving a voice to the people and one giving a voice to the industry specifically. Tell us how what you're doing is moving the needle, giving people a voice about legalization. Tell us about that split.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how different is the work in both fields. We did both together for many years, and that was a very big range of things to do, and sometimes not really fitting good together, something like that. Like an industry association doesn't organize demonstrations usually with dreadlocked people running around and screaming loud and so on. And as a people's movement, we are working much more public. We are really bringing people into the game in the social media issues and making really big protests. We reach a lot of people, we can move a lot of people to make the right click at the right time and so on. As an industry association, you work much more silent behind the doors, in the back rooms and so on, talking directly to people. And you reach other people, other parties especially. On the left side, the parties are more looking what are associations saying, coming from a civil liberty standpoint. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, at the conservative side, they are more hearing about what is big economy saying. So that was one of the reasons why I did this step, to reach really both together, both associations together, different kinds of politicians, and doing that necessary different kinds of work, specialized on both sides to have perfect results on both sides. And so it's important to work together as an industry association and as a people's movement and support each other.
A great example of that in the United States was what just happened in New York. New York just passed recreational cannabis, which surprised everybody. But more importantly, there were two bills on the table, and one was giving licenses to the highest bidder. So we knew it was going to be big business that came in. Well, the New York legacy market has been operating for so many years by really people of color in New York. So the other bill had home grow, had elements that were more leaning toward the little guy. And in an example of what George is talking about, there was an effort organized by the Happy Monkey, which is basically a speakeasy, and they sent an email out to their 25,000 member list, which is basically a list of illicit deliveries that they make, and they said, hey, we need to go into storm the government and tell them that we want option B and not option A. And they went and stormed the government. Literally, they had 10 days before the vote, and thousands of people wrote and called and protested, and they ended up getting option B. So now they're going to have consumption lounges and home grow, and it is not going to give licenses to the highest bidder. So people like Georg, who are organizing the citizens, are making a difference. I'm curious, Finn, you're part of the Conservative Party. You're a businessman, not a lobbyist. how do you perceive governments view the cannabis industry? And tell us about how, from your perspective, all of this is happening.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, in this context, I'm a member of the Conservative Party for 22 years now. But having said that, in 2002, for the first time, I was organizing protest within the party for legalization of cannabis. Back in the days, and I tried to answer the question slowly, very precisely, but I think it's still worthwhile to go back in the days. In 2002, when I wrote my first applications of legalizing cannabis, the way how the Conservative Party perceived me was like, what the hell is going on with this guy? Like, why is
You're in the wrong room.
Why is a member of our party suddenly writing applications for admitting that? And if I look at it now, and in the last 20 years, I had a lot of positions in the party, and I always tried to be a bit active. I saw that the picture is really changing. I mean, just yesterday, there has been Erwin Rüddel here, who is one of the CDU guys who's in the parliament. He's the head of the health commission in the German parliament. So he's a really high-up conservative CDU guy, and he wants to legalize. And I think a lot has changed over that time. So that's definitely the good news. The bad news is that I still have the feeling, talking to politicians almost every day, it's still very mixed. So politicians don't have much knowledge about the cannabis sector. People like Georg and also people like you're working on it, changing it every single day by talking to them. But most of the politicians I know don't even know the difference between the THC and CBD, for example. So for them, it's just the same. Even hemp seed oil for them is just the same. It's something with cannabis, and that should be illegal.
So there's a lot of education that needs to happen.
Exactly.
Right. And Bo was letting me know he wants to comment on what you just said.
Yeah, in the United States, I think a lot of the politicians still have this stereotype associated with cannabis businesses and cannabis operators. And they think of them more from the traditional market rather than from the modern day market. And so one of the roles that NCIA does is we bring this legitimacy and this professionalism to the politicians so that they see the industry in a different light. And I think that's really, really important to transition away from this stereotype and more into the business and legitimate types.
I told everyone yesterday I'm part of we jokingly refer to ourselves as the female cannabis mafia, and it's a group of women CEOs that we are a formal group. We get together. We invite politicians to a monthly dinner with industry leaders, and invariably they say to us, oh, wow, you have supply chain, you have logistics, you have 3PL. They don't realize we're really an industry. They think we all have dreadlocks and bump Bob Marley while we're, it freaks them out, but they do. It's a perfect point that we're all here showing them that we're really an industry. Marijn, tell us about your lobbying efforts.
Well, I think it's a good point. I think education is at the basis of everything we do, and one of the most important things that happened through the split of the DHV and the BVCW, the German Association for Cannabis Industry, is that we show how diverse the landscape is of all possible stakeholders in the industry. It's a very broad topic which goes into very different types of branches, and that it can be useful for a lot of different industries, from law to agriculture, to textile, to high-end applications, machine building, food, also science. So I think it was already there, and now finally the time is coming. We see a lot of momentum coming up, also by companies like Fins, everything that's coming over from North America, that there is a lot of momentum and people have a lot of questions, and they need one central point, an independent point for getting those answers. And I think as in the trade association, we can form such a point of information for politicians, for media, for interested companies to take away uncertainties, risks, in order to make them easier with the topic of hemp, and see what kind of options they have with this new emerging industry and how it can help them and their people, electorates, companies, etc.
The thought that went through my head when you were giving us your answer was that you play an important role in moving the industry forward, but it's also a big responsibility, just like any quote-unquote representative form of anything, if you get your agenda, your personal agenda caught up in things, it can also be problematic. So how do you keep yourself neutral, or how do you make sure you're representing the actual industry?
Well, for me personally, I always keep the plant central. You know, we are working with a natural resource, so it's all about the plant. We all have different reasons why we went into this industry. For me, it's the high potential of it, its naturality, how it shows us that we need to return to circular economy, where we have zero waste options, or very modern day products. So it shows that we can choose different ways, but still live in the same way. And I think all companies, all people I met share that same kind of ideology, and I think that's also what I like to transmit to politicians and to media, that it's much more than just a drug or a medicine or something. It's a solution for a lot of things. Well-being. And I think it's our job at the moment to show that. Yeah. Well-being over money. That was my point yesterday. Anyway, Bo, tell us how an economist, you're a number cruncher essentially, right? How does number crunching function in a lobbying situation? How are you using your skill set and your education to impact the industry?
Well, a lot of the policies, you know, as the industry transitioned, a lot of the policies were based upon what was going on in the headlines. There was a New York Times reporter that had a bunch of edibles in Colorado and freaked out, and then all of a sudden there's these...
Maureen Dowd.
Yeah, and there's all this policy change that says, oh my God, edibles are horrible and we should not have those. And, you know, and so, or there was a headline in the newspaper that talked about energy consumption and the environmental impact. And so they had all of these policy changes that were really harmful to the industry because it was headline driven and not data driven. And so my role is to really provide some numbers and some context of what the impact of the policies are on the industry, or to really size the industry in such a way that it's understandable for the policymakers and takes a lot of the emotion out of the policymaking.
That's huge. That's huge. Does anybody, before we move on to our next question that we all agreed that we were going to answer, any of you want to comment on what's been said so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's probably very important, and I think there were sessions about it before, but I mean, bringing cannabis also to the table is probably, especially in Germany, very much depending on the next election. And I mean, in 4 weeks or 4.5 weeks, we are there. And at the moment, I really have the feeling that there's a change of mindset all over Germany. And I think that helps us a lot. And the funny thing is, when I'm saying that, I don't only mean that left-wing parties are currently on the rise. It's also, even within the conservative parties, we see these changes. And I think this next election can really be a pilot for whole Europe. If Germany decides to open up for model regions, there will be a lot of European countries following, because many of them always wait of what Germany is doing as the center of the European economy. So I think at the moment, the time for having a seat on the table cannot be better than right now.
I couldn't agree more. I think part of what I was talking about yesterday is I feel like Germany is really positioned well to lead Europe and the world, but you have to start looking at yourselves that way. Buying American media, making sure we know who you are, because you know who we are. I really think it would be a good thing for the Germans to step up and lead the world. I think your market's huge. And there's more people using cannabis in Germany than admitting it. So imagine if we got everybody to tell the truth, and the economists could tell us that we're right, and that all these people are using cannabis. We could be powerful. Georg, if you had a magic wand and you could change something in the industry or in lobbying or in the rules that would move us forward, what would it be?
Well, my wish would be that at once, in a big bang, everybody would get involved. Who wants really the cannabis policy to get forward, to get to legalization. I've seen here at the ICBC in Berlin a couple of years long, a lot of companies sitting around doing nothing, don't support any legalized lobbyism, just concentrate on their own little business and little thing. And it's the same for the private people. If millions of cannabis consumers in Germany would at once go on the streets, make huge demonstrations, or support their association, click at the right moment, at the right side, and so on. If they all would get involved in one big bang at the same time, companies and people, we would have legalization in the next week done. So look at yourself, think about maybe putting 10% of your budget for advertisement into your favorite lobby organization.
I love action items, and what he just basically gave us was the solution, which is, I think everyone went 10%, but whatever that number is, give something to a lobbying organization. My daughter, who used to be here in the audience, oh, there she is. Or no, that's not her. Anyway, she was working as an intern for a group that used to register voters. That's what she did one summer. She broke all kinds of records. It was not partisan. She wasn't trying to register Democrats or Republicans, just voters. But they did have a little, bend on it, and it was if you could be 17, you can vote at 18. So if there was a birth date cutoff, and if you were 17 after a certain date, that meant that you were going to be 18 at the time of the election. Well, they know that young voters vote for cannabis, and they know that young voters vote for the environment. So the things that they wanted to pass, they knew if they could get more young voters to vote, they could get their, they were reverse engineering the system. What he's basically saying is, let's reverse engineer the system. Let's figure out, how do you all give €5, let's say, per month? And what I learned from this was, it was better to give €5 per month, 60 euros, than it was to give 60 euros, because those organizations need to budget, and they can't budget if all of a sudden you give them 200 euros or 100,000 euros. They need to have that monthly budget. So everybody in here, if you did a monthly budget and gave some money to your lobbying organization, the people and the government, we could move mountains as an industry. So thank you for that comment. What would your comment be, Finn? If you had a magic wand.
So if I would have a magic wand, I think the first thing I would do is to take cannabis out of the German narcotics drug law, or the BTMG, as many Germans of you know. The reason for that is because I think that's the problem of so many things. If you only look from the medical perspective, prescription via digital health, like e-receipt, like everything that's electronic, is not possible because it's part of the narcotics drug or narcotics drug law. Similar to if you think about model regions or legalization, always the BTMG is the big bottleneck. Also we talked about it earlier, THC in food, the limits you can have, it's all actually focused on the German narcotics drug law. And I think taking out cannabis out of that would open up a whole lot of opportunities to actually really change something for cannabis in Germany, and then hopefully successively in Europe.
Marijn, magic wand, what would you change?
Well, I would definitely say that's a major change that we all need. In addition, what Finn already mentioned is, I think we need to get a higher THC level for foods, because the limits they have proposed now are so low that we actually cannot sell hemp oil anymore. The scientific basis worldwide are much more advanced. We know that the levels can be much, much higher. And those levels are actually at the basis for having a healthy agricultural production of hemp in Germany, and that's the basis for everything. So if we want to do something with hemp, we need to be able to grow it. But if the requirements for the products are still so low that you cannot sell it afterwards, then nobody has the incentive to grow. So I think we should work there primarily, and just adhere to what other countries in the world already found out. And I think that's for us the main focus now. And then from there, the education will take its own loop, and as soon as farmers start, the rest will follow.
I have so much I want to say about that as an edibles company, but this isn't about me. What would you change if you had a magic wand?
If we had a magic wand, I think we would really focus on clearing up a lot of the regulatory uncertainty. There's so much murkiness in regulatory policies that it's inhibiting the growth of the industry. For example, even though hemp is legal in the United States, there's so much uncertainty because the regulators are treating it as though it's an illegal product still. That investment is not flowing in as much into the industry and the like. And so the infrastructural development is being inhibited. The same thing applies on the higher THC side, where there's regulatory uncertainty, there's lack of banking, there's high taxes to the point where they're taxing people out of the industry. So clearing up that regulatory uncertainty and the murkiness would be very, very high on the list.
Marijn?
Yeah, I can only adhere to that. I think that's also in Europe. It's highly essential. We have problems with paying service, banking, insurance. So there's a lot of bureaucracy that needs to be getting out of the way in order to make it much more easy for people to start working in the industry, to have less hurdles, to have more certainty that goes from the investment to the farmers, to the processors, and to the retailers. So
how do we do that? How do we get it less murky?
We should all get together, combine, and be loud.
We go back to that giving €5 a month thing for the lobbyists. Comes back full circle. Finn, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm sometimes wondering what is the better solution, like going out and be loud, or actually what you also described being rather with the politicians in the back. Because what I'm sometimes wondering is about, even though you're loud, you're outside, there's the big Hanfparade in Germany, I think many politicians don't listen to that. And at the end, they are the ones making policy. So I think, for example, what some companies and some associations start doing, and I think the Hanfverband did it also very well, to do tax systems. To say, how would a tax look like? And I think that's something that's super interesting, because if you can convince politicians that they can earn money with the legalization, especially after Corona, where a lot of government subsidies went into the Corona support, every politician right now is looking for money. So just to poke them a little bit and say, like, look, there's a new complete honeypot of money that you can access just by doing that, is something that I think also, yes, get involved and spend more and be loud, but I think being also in the back doors and talking directly to authorities or politicians is also a very, very important factor.
Bo.
So policies right now, both in Europe and in the US, seem to be really controlling. They want to control what's going on rather than support the growth and development of a nascent industry. And so that controlling is really something that if policy were to change and it was supportive, then there would be greater employment, greater economic development, greater offerings on the medical side, on the industrial side, on the wellness side. And so I think politicians and policymakers really need to change the way that they view the industry and promote further growth and development.
We saw that in America where, how many of you are familiar with the Oklahoma market in the US? 2 guys, okay. I flew into Oklahoma City. I got off the airplane, jumped in a cab, and was literally assaulted by billboards. Cannabis here, cannabis, arrows, go, turn the corner, go left, 2 more cannabis dispensaries. Literally, there are more cannabis dispensaries in Oklahoma than coffee shops than Starbucks. It was, I can't remember that, I'm sure Nick knows, but I think it was $5 to get your license. And everybody got a license in Oklahoma. Well, to me, that's the free market, because which is a conservative value. When you let the free market speak, the people that make it win, and the people who run shitty businesses lose. And then you just basically, you bring all the tax money in that comes from selling a ton of product, and you figure out who's running a good business. That is free market economy. So you lower the barrier to entry, and Oklahoma has a really nice market. It's working, and people are getting cannabis, and that's the way it should be. Georg, what would you like to add to the conversation around opening this all up?
Well, I would like to add, when I'm talking to you, it's not about €5 a month and not about 60 a year, which is exactly our usual tariff for private members. But here I'm talking to companies, right? And that's a joke for you. I really meant what I said, 10% of your advertisement budget. Look at the numbers. How much is that? There are little shops maybe who can just spend €1,000 for it. Well, then spend €100. And if you are a bigger company and you have the ability to spend €100,000 for advertisement, think about giving 10,000 to your lobby organization. So then we will move the mountains, right?
The point I was trying to make is that they should budget it on a monthly basis so you can budget it on a monthly basis and not just write you one check. You'll take the money any way you can get it, I get that. I'm just giving them that piece of information that I learned from the process. So right now we have about 15 minutes left. I wanted to open up questions to the audience. We're going to continue here if there are no questions, but before we jump into the next topic, what I want to do is find out what's brewing in your heads out there. Is there anybody that is wanting to talk to us?
Yes, we have one in the back. I'm coming. They're always in the back. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name's Shizuka Pai. I work for Supercritical Brands. That's a marketing and branding agency focused on the global cannabis industry. Also, we run a network in the US called Highly Capitalized. So if anyone would
I'm sorry, it's called what?
Highly Capitalized Network. So if anyone would like to be interviewed and get exposure to key stakeholders in the US, please come and speak to me. So I'm new to the industry, at least professionally, and you know, I've got a few observations being completely new, and it's my first conference. So the first observation is, you know, we've got this real gold rush kind of culture. And, you know, secondly, I haven't heard a lot about consumers at all in the conference so far. You know, the consumer need states, you know, the patients. After all, they're the ones who are making everyone rich. So it'd be interesting maybe to have more discussion around consumers. But the third observation is that I've heard a lot of people talk about ethical values and wanting a different type of industry and not copying what the other industries have done and trying to reverse engineer. So my question to the panel is, you know, have you thought about having a kind of a charter, you know, maybe also one voice for the industry instead of lots of different cannabis associations, one voice with a kind of ethical charter where we say, you know, we would like a different sort of industry with certain, you know, fair trade, sustainability, you know, equal opportunities, et cetera, all the things which probably our consumers in our industry would very much like and would help differentiate.
Can someone close that door, please? Yeah. That low-level noise is probably not great for the recording. Go ahead, Finn.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different questions. I think I tried to answer two of them. One is, I fully agree with you. We have too many associations, and I think we should combine those and really be the one voice instead of having too many different ones. I think it's a big problem, and Georg said it in the beginning, that there are also cannabis companies who are against legalization, so that actually confuses the whole perception of cannabis companies in the public and also towards politicians. However, you cannot change their opinion, but at least the ones who have the same opinion, they should be together and fight for it. The second thing that I actually agree with you completely is what you call the charter. So with our association Pro CBD, I mean CBD is a fraction of the whole cannabis market, but what, for example, we did like a kind of charter where we said this is the rules we want to play by. So what kind of analytics do we use when we say this is the percentage of CBD you find in the product? Because you wouldn't believe how much variation there is in oils that say 10%, and then suddenly you find an oil that is in the reality 12%, and someone doesn't even have CBD in there. So that is one thing. Then the second thing, how you advertise and what kind of promises you make to the customers is something where we also have a self-regulatory charter where we say, if there's no proof in science for it, don't even mention it in your advertising. And I mean, that's just two things. The whole charter is, I think, 15 points. But I think that is something, if we want to be taken serious as a cannabis industry, and also not only be taken serious by our customers and patients, but also by the authorities, we have to grow up as an industry. And growing up as an industry means that we also have to have self-cleaning elements in terms of like differentiating the good and serious companies in the market from, and let's all be honest, there are some black sheeps in the market, because those black sheeps very often determine on how patients and customers and authorities look at the industry. And I think this charter saying this is the rules we play by is something very important. So I full-heartedly agree with what you just said.
Both Marijn and Bo want to comment on that, so we're going to start with Marijn.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think another very important point you mentioned is consumer safety. I think that's the final point where all of our efforts result. So in the end, it should be safe for everybody. For industry players, for consumers, and I think that should be the basis for all kind of regulations and policies that are made. But we believe that those rules should be by scientific standards, where we all get together and let dogmas and old paradigms out. Because in the end, it's
as long as you let
safety.
experts set those levels. Because what we see happening, right, is that you have politicians setting levels, and they don't know what they're doing. So they'll set levels, like you said, in the hemp seeds. So you have to allow the industry to have a voice to set the levels to determine what's safe. Bo, what were you going to say?
So in the early days of the cannabis movement, say 2014, in the legalization, there was a lot of competing policies, a lot of competing interests. And so when politicians would get all of these different perspectives, they wouldn't know who to believe or what was important and the like. And so there's, just as though there's a consolidation in some states of businesses, there's been a consolidation in advocacy groups in the United States. And now, although there are differences from one group to the next, they're starting to align on key issues such as banking, such as taxation, such as social justice and the like, so that they represent the industry in a unified voice. And I have a second comment, is you mentioned the gold rush or the green rush. That's been a significant obstacle for the industry to overcome, because policymakers seem to think that with this gold rush comes all of this money. And so part of the education that we do is educating that very few people in the industry are actually making profits and making money. And that education and that aha moment for the politicians will help them temper their enthusiasm about taxation and implementing these rules that are rather draconian or overbearing when it comes to compliance and all these other costs. So the gold rush has really been one of those things that has been difficult for us to overcome.
A lot of the people that are here didn't see the very first presentation of the Global Investment Forum, and it was eye-opening when you see the billions of dollars that are being hemorrhaged. These companies are losing money. Why are they there? They're investing forward, because we know eventually we'll have an industry and we'll make money. Ngayo. Alrighty.
I have one question. My name is Michael Merkle, and I have an agricultural scientific background, and I'm working at the moment with industrial hemp, and I see directly at the universities how hard is it to work with industrial hemp. It's like I need license from the bee farm to work with industrial hemp in greenhouses, and I talk to a lot of other colleagues, and they want to work with cannabis, but there's also money, but the bureaucracy is so hard, and I think that's a big problem. I'm asking, how do you see it in the next years if we have some improvements? Then from a scientific view, you have the possibility to make research in it, which is the basic for the politicians in order that we can improve all the situation.
Was that a question?
Yeah, his question is, how do we get these politicians to stop treating cannabis like yellow cake uranium and how to treat it like a plant? Because you have to jump through so many hoops just to work with it.
I think, yeah, go ahead, Marijn.
Well, I think, thank you for your question. I cannot agree more with you. It's one of the big hurdles. It's what Finn said. We need to get it out of the narcotics law at the beginning, because that's the biggest stone on the road there. And I think it's our job to show politicians or policymakers that in science, in research, lies the potential of this plant. We know a lot already, but we don't know enough, and especially not how we can introduce it or implement it in already existing industries, or how we can change them for the better using this plant. And I think a lot of people are waiting for these moments to happen, to open up the floodgates of more research money, of easing up bureaucracy. So that's one of the main points also for our association to battle. Yes.
Finn?
Yes, in the beginning I mentioned to you that I'm a member of the Conservative Party, so very often I consider myself a kind of Trojan horse. So because they probably still think about me as a not so cannabis person in the comparison. And just to give you an example, so the left-wing party in Germany, Die Linke, they brought a paper to the parliament that they want to actually redo the whole legislation around industrial hemp. So the limit should go from 0.2 to 0.3. CBD should be always legal when it's from industrial hemp, and so on and so far. And then the CDU was calling me and said, do you want to be a speaker in the parliament hearing about this? And obviously the CDU wanted me to take a more conservative stand on cannabis. And instead of doing it myself, which I could have done, I was actually introducing 3 conservative farmers who have been CDU members for the last 50 years to them, who are growing hemp. And these 3 farmers were actually going crazy to the parliamentarians, saying, the way how you treat us, we want to grow hemp, we need to grow hemp, you're really, with the bureaucracy and with the administration, you're really killing our business. And the CDU, the party, was shocked about how their own voters, who are conservative farmers, were against their stand on industrial hemp. And I loved it, and I think it shows that it's not this classical left-wing, right-wing question anymore. It's actually for many farmers, it's a question of the future of their business. And I think by actually breaking off these typical, or these are against cannabis and these are for cannabis, but really bringing more of those Trojan horses in who are actually fighting for it, I think that's actually a really good thing to do. And the industrial hemp farmers, I think there are so many conservative among them, to actually activate them and send them to the party and to the local parliamentarians and let them tell them how important industrial hemp for them is as farmers. I think that is also something that will change how politicians perceive industrial hemp.
Can everybody please give Finn a hand for doing that? That's magic. That's magic right there. That was awesome.
Hi.
We got another one here. We got another one over here. He's been waiting for a while too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a quick question. So, in my opinion, one of the big differences between the US and Germany is that in the US, you have celebrities that are being a voice for the cannabis industry. Martha Stewart, Snoop Doggy Dogg, Rihanna, Seth Rogen, just name, they're everywhere there. Do you think, that's now a question to the German associations and also to companies, do you think that this would be possible in Germany, or do you want them even to be a voice?
Go for it.
I could react straight away, because if you follow Sanity Group a bit in the press, we have celebrity investors. So, for example, will.i.am is invested in us, but also Mario Götze, the soccer star, and André Schürrle, who has also been part of the national German soccer team. But the thing is, I have this discussion with them quite frequently. And they are not as open as their American counterparts to that. So, for example, when Mario Götze invested, he was really interested in the medical side of the business. And then the Bild newspaper, like the biggest German boulevard newspaper, make the big headline, "Is Mario Götze high? ? He's now investing in cannabis." And then he called me and he was really shaken, saying, "Oh my God, the anti-doping agency will be in front of my door just by tomorrow, because now they are thinking I consume cannabis." And I have the feeling that celebrities in Germany, also in Europe in general, are still very conservative compared to their US counterparts. Would it help if they take a public stand? Absolutely, because people are listening to what these guys saying. So, what, for example, the whole influencers on Instagram and everyone, people are really following. And if Mario Götze would stand there in the public and say, I like cannabis and I use it, I believe so many people who are his followers would think like, oh, wow, it can't be that bad if that serious guy is doing that. And I mean, we are trying that. This is one of the reasons why we took those celebrity investors on board. But I can tell you, it's really hard to convince them to publicly be advocate of cannabis. And I think, unfortunately, as a society, we are not there yet. Once you have this brick in the wall, I think it will fall down, but you need the first 5 to 10 celebrities who are well known, who are really also not the usual suspect, who go to the front and say like, yes, I'm for cannabis.
Does anybody here know Tony Cruz? Can we get him in our, can you get him to join? I mean, I think if he came forward, it's a wrap. We've got the whole world then, right?
He'll be here for the
we've
next...
only got a minute left. Are you the next question? Go for it.
He'll be here for the next ICBC.
Really?
Just kidding, but let's try it out. So hello everyone, my name is Luke, I'm a filmmaker. I got introduced to cannabis by seeing the human rights potential, witnessing villages in Nepal quickly, and a medical patient using RSO for basically escaping his deathbed. So this was my introduction, and ever since I've been filming voices from the cannabis industry. So, short comment, there's so much potential. Question. Yes, the question is needed. Yes. So the question is, after the comment, how do we gather all the knowledge here, only from this room, the financial means, the connections, the wisdom, the experience, the medical data, and we have a lot of data, we learned this today, in order to spread what this conference hall is already knowing on cannabis to our fellow humans. Because when we step outside from this hotel, we're having a pandemic, we have a health crisis, we have an economic crisis, and everyone here in this room knows perfectly that this one beautiful plant provides more than 30,000 products. So this is the question for you guys.
Georg told us we give 10% of our economic money to lobby, but the other fact of the matter is ICBC is doing that. The fact that ICBC brought all of us here and we're all getting on the same page, it's like when the parents go behind the door and they get on the same page before they scold the child. That's what we're doing. We're getting on the same page, and we're going to go talk to our politicians, and we're going to talk to each other, and we're going to stop pretending that we don't use cannabis. You're going to come out of the closet, and you're going to speak the truth, and we're going to fight the stigma.
Yeah. That's the thing. We're fighting. We're fighting against almost 100 years of anti-cannabis propaganda.
And right now we're fighting
world.
the clock because we have to be done, right?
And we are fighting the clock. And I appreciate you for being prompt and punctual. Let's hear it for Jamie Pearson, Bo Whitney, Marian, Finn, and Jorg. That was fantastic.